In a dreary Portland municipal building, an exhausted single mother raised her hand to bid $1 on an impossible dream. Clara Bennett had been invisible for 10 years, working night shifts, cleaning mansions, dismissed by everyone who mattered. When she won an abandoned Victorian orphanage at auction, she discovered something extraordinary hidden in the attic. $287 million in forgotten masterpiece paintings. What began as a desperate search for shelter became a moral battle against ruthless art dealers, corrupt city officials, and her own estranged family over honoring a forgotten woman's 70-year-old legacy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Savamart flickered at 5:47 a.m., casting sickly shadows across the empty aisles. Clara Bennett moved through them like a ghost, her cart of cleaning supplies squeaking against the linoleum. She'd been stocking shelves and mopping floors for 8 hours, her back screaming with each movement, but her face remained carefully blank. "Hey, you missed a spot." Jake, the day shift manager, pointed at the floor near Register 3 without looking at her. He never looked at her. Clara nodded, though he'd already turned away. She grabbed the mop again, her hands raw despite the gloves. Around her, the store was coming alive. Morning shift employees chatting about their weekends, their plans, their lives. None of them acknowledged her presence. She might as well have been part of the fixtures. At 6, she clocked out. The time card machine beeped, and Clara collected her things from the break room locker. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the landlord. She didn't need to listen to the voicemails. She knew what they said. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Clara pressed her forehead against the window, watching Portland wake up around her. Joggers with expensive headphones. Coffee shops with lines of people who could afford $4 lattes. The city looked beautiful in the early morning light, all rose gold and possibility. None of it was for her. Their studio apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled of mildew and someone else's breakfast. Clara climbed the stairs slowly, each step a negotiation with her exhausted body. Inside, Sophie was still asleep on the pull-out couch they shared. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. Clara stood in the doorway, watching her daughter breathe. 8 years old. Sophie deserved so much more than this. "Mama!" Sophie's eyes opened, immediately alert. She'd learned not to be a heavy sleeper. "Morning, sweetheart." Clara forced brightness into her voice. "Time to get ready for school." They moved through their routine with practiced efficiency. Clara made breakfast, the last of the cereal stretched with water because the milk had gone bad. Sophie didn't complain. She never complained. That was somehow worse than if she had. "Mrs. Patterson says we're going on a field trip to the art museum next month," Sophie said, carefully measuring out her small portion. "We need to bring $20. Clara's chest tightened. $20. It might as well have been 20,000. "We'll figure it out, baby." Sophie's smile was too understanding for an 8-year-old. "It's okay if we can't. I've seen pictures of paintings online." Clara turned away, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. She'd once walked through those museum halls herself, notebook in hand, dreaming of becoming an art historian. That Clara, the one who'd had potential, who'd had a future, felt like someone she'd read about in a book. The walk to Riverside Elementary took 15 minutes. Clara held Sophie's hand, even though her daughter insisted she was too old for that. She wasn't ready to let go of this small connection. At the school gates, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Other mothers arrived in cars that cost more than Clara made in a year. They wore yoga pants that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, carried travel mugs from the coffee shop on Morrison Street, discussed their upcoming trips to Hawaii, to Paris, to places Clara couldn't even imagine affording. "Oh, Sophie." One of the mothers, Madison's mom, Clara thought, called out with performative enthusiasm. "I love your dress. Is that vintage?" "Thrift store." The word hung unspoken. Sophie smiled politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Chun." Clara felt the familiar burn of shame. Sophie's dress was clean, carefully mended where the hem had come loose. But it was 3 years old, faded from countless washings, clearly not from this season's Gap Kids collection. The other mothers had already turned away, returning to their conversation about summer homes. Clara didn't exist to them. Just another invisible woman doing invisible labor, raising a child alone, taking up space she hadn't earned. "Have a good day, sweetheart." Clara kissed Sophie's forehead. "You too, Mama." Sophie squeezed her hand once, then ran toward the playground where the other children were gathering. Clara watched her daughter navigate the social minefield with heartbreaking grace, joining a group of kids who tolerated her presence without quite including her. Clara's next job started at 9. She took the bus across town to the West Hills, where houses sat on lots so large you couldn't see the neighbors, where she cleaned toilets and vacuumed carpets in homes that belonged to people who'd probably forgotten what a studio apartment even looked like. Ironically, the Hendersons lived just 3 blocks from her parents' house. Clara had mapped it once in a moment of weakness. She could walk past her childhood home on her lunch break if she wanted. See the garden her mother had always been so proud of. Wonder if they ever thought about her. They didn't. She knew they didn't. Mrs. Henderson left instructions on the kitchen counter, as always. Her careful handwriting spelled out tasks Clara had done 100 times. The woman was kind enough. She left payment in an envelope, never made Clara feel like a servant. But she also never quite looked at Clara directly, never asked about her life. Clara was a service, not a person. At 11:30, Clara sat on the Hendersons' back patio for her lunch break. She'd packed half a sandwich saved from yesterday. Her phone buzzed with another call from the landlord. This time she answered. "Ms. Bennett." Mr. Morrison's voice was professionally regretful. "I'm afraid if I don't receive payment by Friday, I'll have to begin eviction proceedings. You understand, this is a business?" "I understand." Clara kept her voice steady. "I'll have it by Friday." She wouldn't. They both knew she wouldn't. After he hung up, Clara sat with her phone in her hand, staring at nothing. Then, because she couldn't face the emptiness of that moment, she opened her browser and started searching for apartments. Maybe she could find something cheaper. Maybe there was a miracle waiting. The search led her down a rabbit hole of listings, each more depressing than the last. Studios for $1,800 a month. Shared rooms in questionable neighborhoods. Nothing she could afford. Nothing that would take someone with her credit score, her income, her complete lack of references beyond desperate single mother who works 3 jobs and still can't make rent. She was about to close the browser when a listing caught her eye. It was buried deep in the municipal auction sites, the kind of page you only found after clicking through dozens of links. Estate auction. Abandoned property at 4237 North Lombard Street, St. John's neighborhood. Meridian home for lost children. Minimum bid, $1.00. Property sold as is. Buyer responsible for all code compliance, back taxes, and restoration. Auction date, October 7th, 9 a.m. Clara read it 3 times. $1. It had to be a mistake, or a scam, or something with so many hidden costs that the $1 price was meaningless. But her fingers were already typing the address into Google Maps. The property was massive, a Victorian structure that took up half a city block. The street view was years old, showing a building with boarded windows and a yard overgrown with blackberry bushes. But even in decay, Clara could see the bones of something beautiful. The architecture was late 1890s, she thought. Queen and style, with the characteristic turret and decorative woodwork. She shouldn't care about the architecture. She should be focused on practical things. Instead, she found herself searching for more information. The Meridian Home for Lost Children had operated as an orphanage from 1918 to 1987. After closure, it had passed through several owners, none of whom had the resources to maintain it. The city had seized it for unpaid taxes 5 years ago. Multiple developers had shown interest, but the property was landlocked by zoning restrictions and neighborhood opposition to demolition. Clara enlarged the photos. Even abandoned, even decrepit, the building called to something in her. Those high ceilings. Those tall windows that would have let in streams of light. The way the turret room would have given children a place to dream, to imagine they were somewhere else. Lost children. The phrase resonated in her chest like a struck bell. Wasn't that what she and Sophie were? Lost, forgotten, invisible to everyone who mattered. The practical voice in her head, the one that sounded like her mother, listed all the reasons this was insane. She had no money for repairs, no knowledge of building codes or property management, no way to maintain a structure that size. The back taxes alone probably exceeded her annual income. But there was another voice, smaller and nearly forgotten. The voice of the Clara who'd once believed she could be something more than a ghost moving through other people's lives. That Clara whispered, what if? What if she could create something there? Place for women like her. Mothers who'd been abandoned, forgotten, dismissed. A community house where they could support each other. Where their children could play in rooms filled with light. Where being invisible to the rest of the world didn't matter because they'd see each other. It was a fantasy. A desperate daydream born of exhaustion and eviction notices and 8 years of grinding poverty. Clara looked at the auction date again. October 7th. That was in 3 days. She couldn't afford to take the morning off work. She couldn't afford the bus fare to get there. She couldn't afford any of this. But as she sat on the Hendersons' expensive patio furniture, in their beautiful backyard, cleaning their beautiful home for minimum wage while her own daughter went without field trips and new clothes and everything she deserved, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. She was so tired of being invisible. So tired of accepting that this was all her life would ever be. Maybe the auction was a scam. Maybe she'd show up and discover the $1 price was a lie. Maybe nothing would come of it. But maybe, just maybe, this was a sign. A chance. The kind of opportunity that only came once. Clara pulled up her work schedule. She'd have to call in sick for her Saturday grocery shift. Lose a day's pay she couldn't afford to lose. Show up at a municipal building with Sophie in tow because she couldn't afford childcare. The practical voice screamed at her to stop. To be reasonable. To know her place. Clara silenced it. She typed the auction information into her phone's calendar, her hands steadier than they'd been in years. Then she went back inside to finish cleaning the Hendersons' house, moving through their spacious rooms like the ghost she'd always been. But something had changed. For the first time in a decade, Clara Bennett had made a choice that wasn't about survival. She'd chosen to hope. The choice felt terrifying and reckless and absolutely necessary. In 3 days, she'd walk into that auction. She'd raise her hand. She'd bid $1 for a building full of ghosts and broken windows and impossible dreams. And whatever happened next, at least she would have tried. Marcus Webb's hand moved smoothly across the conference table, distributing glossy folders to the assembled developers. Rain streaked the windows of the municipal building, turning downtown Portland into a blur of gray. He smiled his practiced smile, the one that had secured 3 major development projects in the past 18 months. The St. John's property is prime for luxury condos, he said, tapping the rendering on page 3. River views, proximity to downtown, and best of all, the city's motivated to move it quickly. The developers nodded, already calculating profit margins. Marcus had orchestrated this perfectly. The $1 auction was a formality, a legal requirement before the city could transfer the property to his pre-selected buyer. By noon, the paperwork would be filed, and by next quarter, demolition could begin. He checked his watch. 8:45. The auction started at 9. Across town, Clara counted the bills in her wallet for the 3rd time. $43. Enough for bus fare, maybe lunch for Sophie if they needed it. Her hands trembled slightly as she zipped her purse. Mama, are we really going to buy a house? Sophie stood by the door, wearing her best dress. The faded blue one with tiny flowers that Clara had mended so many times the stitching formed its own pattern. We're going to try, baby. Clara knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes. But it might not work out. Sometimes grown-ups have to try things even when they might not succeed. Sophie considered this with her usual unsettling wisdom. Mrs. Patterson says trying is what makes you brave. Clara's throat tightened. Mrs. Patterson is right. The bus ride took 40 minutes. Clara watched the city change through the window. From their neighborhood of peeling paint and chain-link fences to the downtown core where everything looked clean and purposeful. Sophie sat quietly beside her, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the floor. The municipal building loomed gray and imposing. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the air smelled of old carpet and bureaucracy. Clara followed the signs to conference room 3B, her heart hammering against her ribs. The room was smaller than she'd expected. Metal folding chairs faced a podium where a woman in her 60s was organizing papers. Marcus Webb stood near the front, laughing with two men in expensive suits. He had the look of someone who belonged in rooms like this, confident, comfortable, entitled to the space he occupied. Clara found a seat in the back, pulling Sophie close. A few other people trickled in. A young couple holding hands nervously, an older man with a briefcase, and in the corner, an elderly woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything. At exactly 9 o'clock, the auctioneer, her name tag read Patricia Chun, called the room to order. Thank you all for attending. We have one property today, the Meridian Home for Lost Children, located at 4237 North Lombard Street. Minimum bid is $1. The property is sold as is with all associated liens, back taxes, and code compliance responsibilities transferring to the buyer. Do I have any questions before we begin? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus raised his hand. Just to clarify, the buyer assumes all financial obligations, including the estimated $40,000 in back taxes and the costs associated with bringing the structure up to code? Patricia nodded. Correct. The city estimates between $200,000 and $300,000 in immediate compliance costs, not including any desired renovations. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. $200,000 to $300,000. She'd known there would be costs, but hearing the number made her fantasy suddenly, crushingly real. Sophie tugged her sleeve. Mama, what does that mean? It means it's more expensive than I thought, sweetheart, Clara whispered. Marcus caught the exchange. His eyes flicked over them, a woman in a worn jacket and a child in a too small dress, and dismissed them just as quickly. Not even worth considering as competition. That dismissal sparked something in Clara's chest. Anger, maybe, or just exhaustion with being dismissed. Let's begin, Patricia said. Do I have an opening bid of $1? Marcus's hand went up immediately, casual and confident. $1 from bidder number 7. Do I have $2? The young couple exchanged glances but didn't raise their hands. The older man remained still. Patricia's gaze swept the room. Going once at $1. Clara's hand rose before she could stop it. The room went silent. Patricia's eyebrows lifted slightly. Marcus turned in his chair, seeing Clara for the first time as an actual person rather than background scenery. $2 from bidder number 12, Patricia said. Do I have 3? Marcus's smile tightened. $3. He was annoyed now. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Clara could see him doing calculations. How much would he need to bid to make her give up? What would embarrass her into backing down? 4, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Someone in the front row chuckled. The sound made Clara's cheeks burn, but she kept her hand up. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her. Then he stood, walked to where Clara sat, and crouched down to her level. His cologne was expensive. His teeth were very white. Ma'am, I don't think you understand what you're getting into. His voice was kind, patronizing. This property requires significant investment. The back taxes alone. I can read, Clara said quietly. His smile didn't waver. Of course, I'm just concerned you might be taking on more than you can handle. There are legal obligations, city codes, structural assessments. This isn't like buying a house. This is a commercial property with serious liabilities. Do you have a contractor? An attorney? Financing in place? Sophie pressed closer to Clara's side, sensing the tension. Do I need those things to bid? Clara asked. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Technically, no. But then I'd like to continue bidding. He straightened, the kindness in his expression curdling into something harder. $5. he said, not bothering to return to his seat. 10, Clara said. The room was watching now, sensing drama. The young couple whispered to each other. The elderly woman in the corner leaned forward slightly. Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound. You're bidding $10 on a property with $300,000 in immediate costs? Do you even have $10? Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Webb, please return to your seat. Ma'am, your bid is $10? Yes, Clara said. Marcus stalked back to his chair. $100. The game had changed. He wasn't playing anymore. He was punishing her for the audacity of challenging him. Clara did the math in her head. She had $43 in her wallet. Sophie's lunch, their bus fare home, the emergency money she'd been saving for the electric bill. $101, she said. Marcus's face flushed red. 500. Clara's hands shook. She couldn't match that. She couldn't even come close. But then Patricia spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Webb, I'll remind you that excessive bidding on municipal auctions can be grounds for disqualification if it appears designed to discourage legitimate buyers rather than reflect actual property value. Marcus froze. I'm making a legitimate bid. Then you won't mind if we continue in reasonable increments. Patricia turned to Clara. Do you wish to continue, ma'am? Clara looked at Sophie, who was watching her with those two wise eyes. Then she looked at Marcus, at his expensive suit and his confident smile and his absolute certainty that he owned this room, this auction, this outcome. She thought about 10 years of being invisible, of cleaning other people's toilets, of her daughter wearing mended dresses while other children had closets full of clothes they'd wear once and discard. $1, Clara said. The room went silent. I'm sorry, Patricia said. The minimum bid is $1, right? I bid $1. Marcus stood up. She already bid higher than that. You can't go backwards. Actually, Patricia interrupted, consulting her notes. In a municipal auction, any qualified bidder may reset to the minimum bid if all other bidders withdraw. It's designed to prevent artificial inflation. She looked at Marcus. Do you withdraw your $500 bid, Mr. Webb? His face went through several shades of red. This is absurd. I'm a city development officer. I've been working on this property for 2 years. Do you withdraw your bid or not? The silence stretched. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, feel Sophie's hand gripping hers. Finally, Marcus sat down. No. $500. Do I hear 501? Patricia asked, looking at Clara. Clara shook her head. I can't match that. Then going once at $500. Patricia's gavel hovered, going twice. The elderly woman in the corner stood up. Her voice was accented, Eastern European maybe, and absolutely clear. I object to this auction. Everyone turned. On what grounds? Patricia asked. On the grounds that this man, she pointed at Marcus, has been manipulating city processes for personal gain. On the grounds that the Meridian home deserves someone who will honor its history, not bulldoze it for profit. And on the grounds that I was raised in that orphanage, and I have a right to see it protected. Patricia set down her gavel. Ma'am, objections need to be filed in writing before the auction. Then I withdraw my objection and make a bid. $1. Marcus shot to his feet. You can't just... I can, the woman said calmly. Unless you plan to outbid me again? The room held its breath. Marcus looked at the woman, at Clara, at Patricia. The calculation was clear on his face. If he kept bidding, he'd look like exactly what the old woman had accused him of being. Fine, he spat. $1. Let's see how you handle $300,000 in code violations. $2, the elderly woman said. Marcus grabbed his briefcase. This is a waste of my time. When you default on the taxes, the city will seize it anyway, and I'll buy it then for what it's actually worth. He strode toward the door, his companions scrambling after him. Patricia watched him go, then turned to the room. Do I have any other bids? Silence. Going once at $2. Going twice. The gavel fell. Sold to bidder number. I'm sorry, ma'am. You didn't register. The elderly woman smiled. I'm not the buyer. She is. She pointed at Clara. Clara's mouth fell open. What? You bid $1 before me. That makes you the high bidder when Mr. Webb withdrew. The woman walked over and extended her hand. Nadia Kozlov. I lived in the Meridian home from 1948 to 1958. That building raised me when I had no one else. It deserves better than Marcus Webb's wrecking ball. Clara stared at the offered hand, unable to process what had just happened. Sophie tugged her sleeve. Mama, did we win? Patricia cleared her throat. Technically, the last valid bid before Mr. Webb's withdrawal was yours. Ms. Bennett, Clara whispered. Clara Bennett. Ms. Bennett bid $1, which was accepted when Mr. Webb withdrew. So yes, Ms. Bennett, pending paperwork and assuming you can provide proof of funds. I have $1, Clara said, the absurdity of it hitting her. Patricia's professional mask cracked slightly, revealing something like a smile. Then I suppose we have a sale. Please come sign the preliminary documents. Clara stood on shaking legs, still holding Sophie's hand. Nadia walked beside her toward the front of the room, her expression stern but her eyes warm. That building has a soul, Nadia said quietly. But souls need tending. Can you tend it? Or are you just another person who'll let it die? Clara met the old woman's gaze. I don't know, she said honestly. But I'll try. Nadia nodded, satisfied. That's all Evelyn ever asked for. Someone willing to try. Who's Evelyn? The woman who built the Meridian home. The woman who saved my life. Nadia pressed something into Clara's hand. A key, old and heavy. She would have liked you, I think. You have her stubbornness. 45 minutes later, Clara stood outside the municipal building, holding a manila folder full of papers she didn't fully understand and a key to a building she couldn't afford to fix. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming. Sophie pulled her toward the bus stop. Can we see our new house, Mama? Our new house. The words didn't feel real, but Clara found herself nodding. Yes, baby. Let's go see what we bought. The orphanage stood like a ghost at the end of Lombard Street, its Victorian turret rising above the neighborhood like a forgotten promise. Clara and Sophie stood on the cracked sidewalk, staring up at boarded windows and paint-peeled walls. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Clara felt something she couldn't quite name. Recognition, maybe, like the building was seeing her the way she saw it. Both of them forgotten, both of them waiting for someone to remember they mattered. It's beautiful, Sophie breathed. Clara squeezed her daughter's hand. It will be, she said, and chose to believe it. The key turned in the lock with a grinding protest of rust and time. Clara pushed the heavy front door, and it opened with a shriek that sent pigeons scattering from the eaves. Dust motes swirled in the shaft of afternoon light that cut through the gloom. Wow, Sophie whispered, stepping into the entrance hall. The orphanage's interior was a cathedral of abandonment. The ceiling soared 20 feet above them, decorated with plasterwork that had once been white but now hung in yellowed strips. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor, its banister carved with intricate scrollwork beneath layers of grime. To the left, double doors stood half open, revealing what must have been a dining hall, long and empty, with rectangles of cleaner floor where tables had once stood. Clara's art history training kicked in despite herself. The woodwork was oak, she thought, hand-carved, probably by craftsmen who'd immigrated from Europe. The plaster medallions on the ceiling bore motifs she recognized from the arts and crafts movement. Someone had built this place with care, with the intention that it would last. Can we explore? Sophie was already moving toward the staircase, her earlier fear replaced by curiosity. Carefully, Clara said, testing the first step. It held. Stay close to me. They moved through the first floor like archaeologists discovering a tomb. The kitchen still had an enormous cast-iron stove, its surface spotted with rust. In what Clara guessed had been a classroom, a chalkboard remained on the wall, covered in layers of graffiti and grime. Broken desks were piled in one corner. But it was the details that caught Clara's attention. the way the windows had been positioned to maximize natural light. The built-in shelving in what might have been a library. The small touches, a hook at child height by each bedroom door, a lower section of handrail on the stairs so smaller hands could grip it. Someone had loved this place, had built it not just as an institution but as a home. "Mama, look." Sophie pointed to a faded mural on the dining hall wall. Beneath decades of water damage, Clara could make out painted trees, flowers, children playing. The colors were barely visible, but the care in the brushwork remained. "This beautiful, baby." They found the attic stairs on the 3rd floor, behind a door Clara had assumed led to a closet. The steps were narrow and steep, disappearing into darkness above. "Maybe we should save this for another day," Clara said, eyeing the questionable structure. "Please." Sophie's eyes were wide with that particular mix of pleading and determination that Clara could never resist. "We're already here." Clara tested the first step, then the second. They creaked but held. "Okay, but you stay behind me." The attic was massive, spanning the entire footprint of the building. Weak light filtered through gaps in the boarded windows, casting striped shadows across mountains of debris. Water-stained boxes were stacked haphazardly. Broken furniture created obstacle courses. The air smelled of mold and old paper and time. "Be careful where you step," Clara warned, picking her way deeper into the space. She found the first box of records near the east wall. The cardboard had deteriorated, but inside, manila folders were still relatively intact. Clara opened one carefully. A photograph fell out. Black and white, edges yellowed. A row of children stood in front of the orphanage, all of them looking directly at the camera. They weren't smiling. Photos from that era rarely showed smiles, but there was something in their postures. Dignity, Clara thought. They stood like they mattered. She opened another folder. Ledgers, handwritten in careful script. Names, dates of arrival, dates of departure. Medical notes, education progress. Someone had documented everything with meticulous care. "Evelyn Meridian," Clara read from a signature at the bottom of one page. The woman Nadia had mentioned. Sophie had wandered to the far end of the attic, where the ceiling sloped down to meet the outer walls. "Mama, this sounds funny." Clara looked up. "What sounds funny?" "The wall." Sophie knocked on it. The sound was hollow, not the solid thud of plaster against brick. Clara set down the ledger and moved to where Sophie stood. She knocked on the wall herself. Definitely hollow. She traced her fingers along the seam where wall met ceiling, finding a gap that shouldn't exist. "Help me look for an edge," she told Sophie. They worked their way along the wall, hands searching. Sophie found it. A place where the plaster had pulled away slightly, revealing darkness behind. Clara's heart hammered as she pulled. The false wall was lighter than it should have been, constructed from some kind of board rather than proper plaster. It came away in sections, revealing a doorway. Beyond it, incredibly, a light switch. Clara flipped it. Nothing happened for a moment. Then fluorescent tubes flickered to life, casting harsh white light across a hidden room. The space was perhaps 15 feet square, with proper walls and a climate control unit that hummed quietly in the corner. The electricity still worked. Someone had paid the bills or the system had been on its own circuit. But none of that mattered compared to what lined the walls. Paintings, dozens of them, carefully wrapped in protective cloth and stored on custom-built racks. Clara's hands trembled as she unwrapped the first one. Even before she removed all the cloth, she knew. The style, the brushwork, the way the light had been captured, it was a portrait. A woman in profile, her neck elongated in that distinctive style. The signature in the corner made Clara's breath catch. Modigliani. She set it down with shaking hands and reached for another. Unwrapped it. A landscape, all angular lines and emotional intensity. Sheila. Another. A study of a woman, gold leaf still gleaming after decades. Klimt. Mama, what are these? Sophie peered at the portraits, her head tilted. Clara couldn't answer. Her art history education was screaming at her. These weren't reproductions. The craquelure in the paint was real, decades of aging. The canvas had the texture of early 20th century materials. The signatures. She moved to the next painting and the next. Each one had a small card attached, written in the same careful handwriting from the ledgers. Yuri Volkov, 1923. In Trust for the Children. Marie Lauron, 1927. In Trust for the Children. Johannes Fischer, 1929. In Trust for the Children. Clara sank to the floor, her legs unable to support her. This wasn't possible. Paintings like these belonged in museums, in private collections worth millions. They didn't sit forgotten in the attic of an abandoned orphanage. But here they were. She counted them, 37 paintings in total. Some by artists whose names she recognized immediately, the Modigliani, two Sheilas, a Klimt study. Others by names she'd have to research, artists who might be less famous but whose work from this period could still be valuable. Very valuable. Clara's mind raced through calculations she could barely process. A single Modigliani could sell for tens of millions at auction. The Klimt, even as a study, could be worth several million. Even the lesser-known artists, if authenticated, if they were genuine. Are the paintings pretty? Sophie asked, touching the edge of one canvas gently. Clara looked at her daughter, at this 8-year-old child in her mended dress standing in a hidden room full of what might be hundreds of millions of dollars in art. Yes, baby, Clara whispered. They're very pretty. She stood on shaking legs and moved through the room systematically, photographing each piece with her phone, careful not to touch the canvases themselves. The cards, the signatures, everything. Her mind kept trying to make sense of it. Why were these here? How had they ended up in an orphanage? The card said, "In trust for the children." But what did that mean? And why had no one found them before? She returned to the ledgers in the main attic, searching now with new purpose. Found receipts tucked between pages. Art supplies, canvas, oil paints, studio materials, ordered in quantities far exceeding what a children's home would need for simple art classes. Then she found a newspaper clipping, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. Portland Mercury, 1925. A photograph of a gallery opening. The caption identified several people, including philanthropist Evelyn Meridian, known for her support of immigrant artists. Clara sat back, pieces clicking together. Evelyn had known artists, had supported them somehow, and they'd given her paintings in return. But why hide them? Why the secret room? Mama, I'm hungry. Sophie's voice pulled Clara back to the present. Clara checked her phone. They'd been here for 3 hours. It was nearly 4 o'clock, and Sophie hadn't eaten since breakfast. Okay, sweetheart, let's go home. Can we come back tomorrow? Clara looked at the hidden room, at the paintings that represented more money than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, at the mystery of Evelyn Meridian and the orphanage and the artists who'd left their work in trust for the children. Yes, she said, we'll come back. They made their way down through the orphanage, Clara's mind spinning. She needed to verify what she'd found. Needed someone who could authenticate the pieces, who could tell her if this was real or if she was losing her mind. At the front door, she paused and looked back into the entrance hall. In the fading afternoon light, she could almost see it. Children running through these rooms, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. Evelyn Meridian, whoever she'd been, watching over them. And in the attic, hidden away, a fortune in art waiting for someone to find it. Clara locked the door behind them, the key heavy in her pocket. On the bus ride home, Sophie fell asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from exploration. Clara stared out the window, seeing nothing. She'd come to the auction hoping for shelter, for a place to belong. Instead, she'd found something that would change everything. The question was whether that change would save them or destroy them. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay on the pull-out couch beside Sophie, staring at the ceiling while her phone glowed in her hand. The photographs of the paintings filled her screen, each one impossibly real, impossibly valuable. At 3 a.m., she started composing an email. Dr. Adrian Cross taught art history at Reed College. Clara had found his faculty page while researching authentication processes, scrolling through academic credentials until her eyes blurred. He'd published extensively on early 20th century European artists, particularly those who'd emigrated to America. She deleted her first draft. Too desperate. The second was too vague. The third made her sound insane. Finally, she wrote, Dr. Cross, I'm researching several paintings that may have provenance connections to Portland's immigrant artist community in the 1920s. Would you be available for a brief consultation regarding authentication procedures? I can provide photographs and documentation. Professional. Careful. No mention of Modigliani or millions of dollars or the fact that her hands were still shaking. She hit send at 3:47 a.m. His reply came at 9:15 a.m. Ms. Bennett, I receive numerous inquiries about attic discoveries. In my experience, 99% are reproductions or wishful thinking. However, if you can provide clear photographs with details of signatures and any provenance documentation, I'll take a look. No promises. Clara sent 3 photographs. The Modigliani portrait, close-ups of the signature, and a specific area of brushwork she remembered from her graduate seminars. The card that had been attached, Yuri Volkov, 1923, in trust for the children. She added, the brushwork shows characteristic elongation of form consistent with Modigliani's 1920-23 period. Paint craquelure appears authentic to age. Signature matches documented examples, including the specific pressure variation in the final I. 2 hours of silence. Then, where did you find this? I need to see it in person. Today, if possible. Clara's heart hammered as she typed the address. She was measuring coffee, her last grounds, stretched with yesterday's filter, when someone pounded on the orphanage door. Not knocked. Pounded. Through the warped glass, she saw Marcus Webb. Behind him stood a man in a city inspector's jacket, clipboard in hand. Clara opened the door 6 inches, keeping her body blocking the entrance. Ms. Bennett. Marcus's smile was all teeth, no warmth. This is Leonard Park, City Building Inspector. We're here to conduct a mandatory safety inspection. I wasn't notified of any inspection. Emergency inspections don't require advance notice. Marcus gestured to the building, especially for structures with obvious code violations. Those boarded windows, for instance. Fire hazard. And I'd be willing to bet the electrical system is completely non-compliant. Leonard looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. Ma'am, if you could just let us... Do you have a warrant? Clara asked. Marcus's smile tightened. We don't need a warrant for safety inspections. Now, we can do this the easy way, or I can call the police and we can do it the hard way. Your choice. Clara's mind raced. The attic. The paintings. If they went up there, if they saw. The easy way, she said. But you stay on the first floor. The upper floors are structurally unsafe. I haven't had time to assess them yet. That's exactly why we need to inspect them, Marcus said, already pushing past her. Clara moved to block the staircase. No. First floor only, or you leave and come back with actual paperwork. Marcus stopped, his face flushing. You don't seem to understand your situation. This building is a public safety hazard. One phone call and I can have it condemned. Then where will you and your daughter live? The threat hung in the air between them. Make your call, Clara said quietly. But until you have legal authority to enter the upper floors, you're not going up there. For a long moment, Marcus stared at her. Then he smiled, a different smile now, calculating. Leonard, make notes of every violation you see. Ms. Bennett will be filing our report with the city. You'll have 72 hours to address critical safety issues or face condemnation proceedings. They moved through the first floor, Leonard marking things on his clipboard while Marcus provided running commentary about structural deficiencies, code violations, and the astronomical costs Clara would face. When they finally left, Clara locked the door and leaned against it, her legs shaking. A knock came 10 minutes later. Clara nearly didn't answer, but a voice called out, Ms. Bennett? I'm Adrian Cross. We corresponded this morning? The man on the porch was in his early 50s, slightly rumpled, with gray-streaked hair and glasses that had slipped down his nose. He carried a leather messenger bag and looked profoundly uncomfortable. Dr. Cross, Clara said, relief flooding through her. I apologize for the short notice, but after seeing those photographs. He trailed off, studying her face. Are you all right? You look pale. City inspector just left. They're trying to condemn the building. Adrian frowned. Before you've had time to make any repairs? That's unusual. He hefted his bag. May I see the paintings? Clara led him up to the attic, to the hidden room. When the lights flickered on, Adrian stopped in the doorway. His face went through several expressions. Disbelief, shock, professional excitement. My God, he breathed. He moved to the Modigliani first, pulling a magnifying loupe from his bag. His hands trembled slightly as he examined the brushwork, the signature, the craquelure patterns in the paint. This is real, he said finally. This is actually real. He examined 3 more paintings in silence, methodical and thorough. Finally, he set down his loupe and looked at Clara. Do you understand what you have here? Valuable paintings, Clara said. No. You have a museum-quality collection of early 20th century European art. Conservatively, I'd estimate the total value at over $200 million. Possibly more. The number made the room tilt. This will change your life, Adrian continued. But not necessarily for the better. Everyone will want a piece. The art world, collectors, the city, the IRS. Your life is about to become very, very complicated. He paused. My advice? Tell no one else until we understand the legal situation. Not friends, not family. No one. Clara thought about Marcus's threat, about the inspection report he'd file, about the 72 hours she had before everything fell apart. It might be too late for that, she said. Adrian returned the next morning with boxes from the Reed College archives. He spread newspapers across the attic floor, yellowed pages from the 1920s Portland Mercury, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Evelyn Meridian, he said, pointing to a photograph. A woman in her 40s stood beside an easel, surrounded by children. Wealthy widow, lost her only child to the 1918 flu pandemic. Clara studied the image. Evelyn's face was stern but not unkind, her eyes direct. She transformed her grief into purpose. Adrian continued, unfolding another clipping. Opened the Meridian home in 1920. But look at this, she was known for supporting immigrant artists. Portland had a thriving bohemian community back then. They worked through the documents together. Gallery openings where Evelyn appeared as patron. Artists' testimonials mentioning her generosity. A pattern emerged, struggling artists, many with children they couldn't afford to care for, finding refuge at the Meridian home. Nadia arrived at noon carrying soup and bread. She settled beside Clara, her eyes distant with memory. Evelyn insisted we learn about art, Nadia said. Music, literature, culture. She'd say, you might not have money, but you deserve beauty. The artists would visit, bring their children. Some stayed for weeks. Clara found Evelyn's journals in a locked drawer that afternoon. The final entry, dated March 1952, was brief. The paintings should be sold to create an endowment for future mothers whose society has forgotten, so they might care for children with the dignity I tried to provide. Clara's hands trembled holding the page. Evelyn's story was her story. Both invisible women. Both trying to care for children in a world that didn't value their labor. She never executed the will, Adrian said quietly. Died suddenly. The orphanage declined for decades. The paintings were forgotten. Clara looked at the journal, at Evelyn's careful handwriting planning a future that never came. Now that future rested in Clara's hands. The leak came 3 days later. Clara was restocking shelves at Savamart when her phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails from addresses she didn't recognize. She pulled it out with flour-dusted hands, her stomach dropping as she read the screen. 43 missed calls. The first voicemail was from a reporter. Ms. Bennett, this is Jennifer Walsh from Oregon Live. We're hearing reports of a significant art discovery at the property you recently acquired. Would you be available for comment? The second was from a law firm in New York. The third was from someone claiming to be the great-grandson of an artist named Johannes Fischer. Clara's hands shook as she scrolled through them. By the time she reached the 10th message, her vision was blurring. "Bennett, you got a problem?" Her supervisor stood at the end of the aisle, arms crossed. "I need to leave," Clara said. "Your shift ends at 2. I need to leave now." She didn't wait for permission, just grabbed her jacket and ran for the bus, her phone still buzzing in her pocket. The orphanage was surrounded by news vans when she arrived. Reporters clustered on the sidewalk, cameras pointed at the building. Someone spotted her approaching and shouted her name. They swarmed, microphones thrust toward her face, questions overlapping into noise. "Ms. Bennett, can you confirm the Modigliani? Estimated value of 200 million? Legal ownership of the collection?" Clara pushed through them, fumbling with her keys, got the door open and slammed it behind her, her heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, her phone rang again. She answered without checking the caller ID. Clara, her brother's voice. She hadn't heard it in 10 years. She hung up. It rang again immediately. "James." She let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Clara, it's James. I saw the news. Mom and Dad are concerned. They want to help. Please call me back. We're family, we should." She deleted it. Taylor Morrison showed up that evening, slipping past the remaining reporters with practiced ease. They knocked firmly on the door. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Taylor Morrison from the Portland Tribune. I know you're not talking to press, but I think you should hear what I have to say. It's about Marcus Webb." Clara cracked the door. "I'm not interested." "He leaked your discovery to kill it," Taylor said quickly. "He wants you overwhelmed, wants you to default so the city can seize the property. I can prove it, but I need to come inside." Clara studied them, young, intense, holding a laptop bag like a weapon. 5 minutes, she said. Taylor's article came out the next morning. The headline read, "City Development Officer's Conflict of Interest in St. John's Property Dispute." It detailed Marcus's development plans, his connections to the buyers he'd tried to install, the procedural irregularities in the auction process. It was thorough, well-researched, and scathing. It also made everything worse. By noon, Marcus had filed legal motions claiming the paintings were city property, arguing the sale hadn't fully closed when the discovery was made. His lawyers cited obscure property law, claiming Clara had fraudulently concealed assets during the transaction. That afternoon, a woman in an immaculate black suit appeared at the door. No news van, no microphone. Just quiet confidence and a business card that read Vanessa Cross, Cross Gallery. "Ms. Bennett, I represent several private collectors who are very interested in your discovery. May I come in?" Something about her smile made Clara's skin crawl, but she was too exhausted to refuse. Vanessa moved through the first floor with the assessing eye of someone pricing furniture at an estate sale. When Clara led her to the attic, to the hidden room, Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "Extraordinary," she breathed, examining the Klimt. "Simply extraordinary." She turned to Clara. "I can offer you $300 million. Cash. Transferred to any account you specify within 1 week. No publicity, no legal complications, no questions asked. You and your daughter could disappear. Start over somewhere no one knows your name." The number made Clara's ears ring. "My ex-husband probably told you these belong in museums," Vanessa continued. "Adrian always was sentimental about public access. But consider this, museums will tie you up in legal battles for years. The city will claim ownership. Artists' descendants will file suits. The IRS will want their share. You'll spend everything you might gain just fighting to keep it." She pulled out a contract, already prepared. "Or you could wake up next week with $300 million and none of these problems. Your choice." Clara looked at the contract, at the number written there, at the solution to every problem in her life. "I need to think about it," she said. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Of course, but my clients are discreet and impatient. The offer expires in 72 hours. After she left, Clara sat alone in the attic, surrounded by Evelyn's paintings. Her phone buzzed with another call from James. Another voicemail from a lawyer. Another message from someone who wanted something from her. Downstairs, she heard Sophie's voice. Nadia had picked her up from school, protecting her from the reporters still camped outside. "Are we in trouble, Mama?" Sophie asked when Clara came down. Clara pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "No, baby, we're not in trouble." But she was lying, and they both knew it. The legal aid clinic smelled of old coffee and desperation. Clara sat in a plastic chair, Sophie coloring beside her, waiting for someone who could help. Rachel Kim appeared 40 minutes late, carrying 3 overstuffed file folders and a coffee that had clearly gone cold hours ago. She dropped into the chair across from Clara with the exhausted efficiency of someone who'd learned to function on 4 hours of sleep. "Ms. Bennett, you're the orphanage case." Rachel flipped open a folder. "I'll be honest, I usually handle evictions, not multi-million-dollar art disputes. But your intake form was interesting enough that I bumped you up the list." "I can't afford a regular attorney," Clara said. "Obviously, or you wouldn't be here." Rachel's bluntness was somehow refreshing after days of reporters' false sympathy and Vanessa's practiced charm. "Tell me everything, and I mean everything." Clara did. The auction, the discovery, Marcus's harassment, the legal claims, Vanessa's offer. Rachel took notes in sharp, abbreviated handwriting, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the problem's core. When Clara finished, Rachel sat back. "Marcus Webb. I've been trying to nail that bastard for 3 years. He's displaced half of North Portland with his development schemes." She smiled, sharp and predatory. "This might be the angle I need. So you'll take the case?" "Pro bono, yes. Not because I'm nice, but because watching Marcus Webb lose in court would make my entire career worthwhile." Rachel pulled out her laptop. "Let's talk strategy. First, the city's claim is weak. The sale was finalized before you discovered the paintings. Second, I've been building a file on Marcus's procedural violations. Taylor Morrison's article just gave me ammunition." Over the next hour, Rachel outlined a defense that made Clara's head spin. Countersuits, discovery motions, media strategy. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who'd found her purpose. Father Miguel Santos arrived as they were finishing, having heard about Clara's situation through the neighborhood network. He sat quietly, listening, then spoke. "What if the paintings funded what Evelyn intended? A refuge for single mothers, run from this building. The church could help. We have experience with social services, grant applications." Clara stared at him. "You mean actually honor her wishes?" "Why not?" Miguel's eyes were kind but serious. "You could create something that lasts beyond money. A legacy." Before Clara could respond, the clinic door opened. A man in an expensive suit entered, flanked by 2 attorneys. He was older, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "Ms. Bennett," he said in accented English. "I am Dmitry Volkov. I believe you have something that belongs to my family." Dmitry Volkov commanded the small legal aid office like he commanded everything, with quiet, absolute authority. His attorneys flanked him, sleek and sharp as knives. Rachel immediately shifted into defensive posture, her hand moving protectively toward Clara's case file. "Mr. Volkov," Rachel said coolly, "this is a private consultation. You can't just—" "I apologize for the intrusion." Dimitri's English was precise, formal. "But I have traveled from New York specifically to speak with Ms. Bennett. I believe we can resolve this matter more pleasantly than through litigation." He pulled a photograph from his jacket, old, sepia-toned, showing a gaunt young man holding a paintbrush. "My grandfather, Yuri Volkov. He came to America in 1921, fleeing the revolution. He was starving when he arrived in Portland. Talented but starving." Clara recognized the name from one of the cards. "He left paintings at the orphanage. Evelyn Meridian saved his life," Dmitry said. "She cared for my father when my grandfather could not afford to feed him. In gratitude, he gave her his paintings. But he never sold them, never donated them legally. They were collateral, a promise. My lawyers believe they should be returned to the family. Rachel leaned forward. That's a stretch legally. Those paintings have been abandoned property for 70 years. I am not here to threaten litigation. Dmitri turned to Clara, his expression softening slightly. My grandfather spoke of Evelyn Meridian until the day he died. Called her a saint. I have no wish to dishonor her memory by stealing from someone she would have wanted to help. He paused. I propose a negotiation. Return my grandfather's works, there are 4 of them, and I will provide legal and financial support for whatever you choose to do with the rest, including helping you fight Marcus Webb. The offer hung in the air. Rachel scribbled notes furiously, her legal mind already calculating angles. I need time to think, Clara said. Dmitri nodded. Of course, my card. He placed it on the table. Unlike some, I am patient, and I honor debts, even those inherited across generations. After he left, Father Miguel spoke quietly. He's not wrong, you know. Those paintings were gifts of gratitude, not sales. There's honor in returning them. Clara's head was spinning. Rachel was already drafting counterarguments. Miguel was contemplating moral obligations. Sophie sat in the corner, still coloring, seemingly oblivious to the adults deciding her future. The next morning brought a new crisis. Clara was making breakfast when someone knocked. Not the reporters. They'd mostly dispersed after Taylor's second article exposed Marcus's corruption. This knock was hesitant, almost apologetic. She opened the door to find a man in his mid-30s. Well-dressed, successful-looking, with eyes the exact shade of Sophie's. Clara. His voice cracked slightly. It's David. David Marsh. The room tilted. Clara gripped the doorframe, every muscle in her body going rigid. You need to leave, she said. Please, just 5 minutes. I saw the news. I needed to see if you were okay. If Sophie. You don't get to say her name. Clara's voice was low, dangerous. You don't get to show up after 10 years and pretend you care. I know I don't have the right. David's hands shook. But I'm here. I want to help. I can provide child support retroactively. I can set up a college fund. I'm not asking for anything regarding the paintings. I want to be part of her life. Mama! Sophie appeared behind Clara, drawn by the raised voices. Who is that? Clara felt her heart break. Sophie was looking at David with pure curiosity, no recognition because how could there be? He was a stranger. David's face crumpled. Hi, Sophie. He looked at Clara, asking permission he hadn't earned. Go inside, baby, Clara said gently. But, now, please. Sophie retreated, but Clara could see her hovering just beyond the doorway, listening. You left, Clara said, her voice shaking. I was pregnant and scared and you vanished. You didn't answer my calls. You blocked my emails. I had to drop out of school. I lost my family, my future, everything, and you just disappeared. I was 22 and terrified, David said. I panicked. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I've regretted it every single day since. That doesn't fix anything. I know. His eyes were wet. But I'm here now. I want to try. I'm married, Jennifer. She's wonderful. She didn't know about Sophie until I told her last week. She's angry, processing, but she understands. We want to help. You want to help now? Now that I have something valuable? David flinched. That's not. The timing is terrible, I know how it looks. But I've followed your life. Social media, mutual friends. I've wanted to reach out for years, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid I'd make things worse. The news coverage just gave me the push I needed. Clara laughed bitterly. You've been watching? You've known where we were, how we struggled, and you did nothing? I sent money, anonymously, through a service. I don't want your money. Clara's voice rose. I wanted you there. Sophie needed a father, and you chose to be a coward. They stood in silence, years of anger and hurt filling the space between them. Car pulled up. A woman emerged, mid-30s, professional, her expression carefully neutral. She approached slowly. I'm Jennifer, she said to Clara. David's wife. I didn't know about you or Sophie until 8 days ago. I'm still processing my own anger about that. She looked at David with something between love and betrayal. But whatever he did, whatever mistakes he made, that child inside deserves to know her father if she wants to. She doesn't know what she wants, Clara said. She's 8. Then maybe it's time she gets to decide. Jennifer's voice was kind but firm. I'm a mother too. I have stepchildren. I understand wanting to protect them from disappointment. But David's here. He's trying. Shouldn't Sophie at least have the choice? Clara wanted to scream, wanted to slam the door and make them disappear. But Sophie was still listening, and Sophie deserved better than watching her mother's rage. One meeting, Clara said finally. Supervised. At the orphanage. This Saturday. If Sophie wants to see you again after that, we'll discuss it. If she doesn't, you leave and don't come back. David's relief was palpable. Thank you. Don't. Clara cut him off. Don't thank me. This isn't for you. It's for her. After they left, Clara found Nadia in the orphanage kitchen, preparing lunch. The old woman took one look at Clara's face and pulled her into a chair. Sophie's father showed up, Clara said. Nadia made a noise of disgust. After 10 years? What does he want? To help, to be involved, maybe to claim part of the fortune. Clara put her head in her hands. I don't know what to do. Nadia was quiet for a long moment. I was raised without parents, she said finally. Evelyn was the closest thing I had to a mother. And you know what I learned? You can't protect children from all disappointment. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting people try, even if they failed before. What if he hurts her? Then you'll be there to help her heal, just like you've always been. Nadia squeezed Clara's hand. But maybe he's changed. Maybe he deserves a chance to prove it. Clara wanted to argue, but she was too exhausted. That afternoon, Taylor Morrison published another article. This one painted Clara as hoarding public treasures, using carefully edited quotes to make her sound greedy. The comments section exploded with outrage. Social media debates raged about whether one person should profit from art meant for everyone. Her phone buzzed with death threats, accusations, demands that she donate everything to museums immediately. Clara sat in Evelyn's old office, surrounded by Evelyn's journals, and finally allowed herself to cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. For 10 years of struggle. For the complexity of David's reappearance. For the impossible weight of decisions she wasn't qualified to make. Sophie found her there, climbed into her lap without speaking, and simply held on. I love you, Mama, she whispered. Clara held her daughter, breathing in her presence, and tried to remember why any of this mattered. Outside, the world wanted pieces of her. Inside, she had this. One small girl who loved her unconditionally. It would have to be enough. The mediation room was too small for the egos it contained. Clara sat between Rachel and Adrian, facing a table crowded with attorneys, city officials, museum representatives, and claimants she'd never met. Marcus Webb occupied the far corner, his expression carefully neutral but his jaw tight. Dmitry Volkov sat with quiet dignity beside his legal team, and Vanessa Cross, uninvited but undeterred, had positioned herself near the door like she owned the building. Let's begin. The mediator, a gray-haired woman named Susan Chan, opened her folder. We're here to resolve competing claims regarding the art collection discovered at 4237 North Lombard Street. Ms. Bennett, you're the property owner. Multiple parties have asserted interest in the paintings. Marcus spoke first, his voice resonant with practiced authority. The city maintains that since the sale wasn't fully finalized when the discovery was made, the paintings constitute municipal property. Ms. Bennett fraudulently concealed assets during the transaction. Rachel responded immediately. The sale was legally complete. My client had no knowledge of the paintings at the time of purchase. There was no fraud. A museum representative leaned forward. Setting aside ownership questions, these works represent significant cultural heritage. They belong in public institutions where they can be studied, preserved, and appreciated by everyone. My grandfather created those paintings, Dmitri said quietly. 4 of them bear his signature. They were never sold, never donated. They should return to his family. The arguments continued, each party presenting compelling claims. Artists' descendants who'd been located overnight. Tax authorities concerned about estate implications. Insurance assessors worried about liability. Clara listened to them dissect Evelyn's legacy like it was a business transaction. Like the paintings were just assets to be divided rather than pieces of a woman's heart. Ms. Bennett, Susan said, you've been quiet. What do you want? Clara looked at the faces around the table. At Marcus, who saw dollar signs and development opportunities. At the museum representatives, who saw cultural capital. At Dmitri, who saw family history. At Vanessa, who saw profit margins. I don't know, Clara said honestly. Vanessa seized the moment. Which is why my offer stands. $350 million, Ms. Bennett. Cash. Immediate. No legal complications, no years of litigation. You could give Sophie everything she deserves. The number echoed in the silence. Think about it, Vanessa continued, her voice smooth as silk. Sophie's education, security, a house where she doesn't have to share a pull-out couch with her mother. You've suffered enough. Take the money. Start over. Clara felt the weight of every eye in the room. The temptation was visceral, overwhelming. She could end this, could walk away with more money than she'd earn in 100 lifetimes. I need a break, she said. The mediator nodded. 15 minutes. Clara walked through the orphanage alone, her footsteps echoing in empty rooms. She found Sophie in what had been the library, sitting on the floor with Evelyn's journals spread around her. Mama, look. Sophie held up a drawing tucked between pages. Children playing in a garden, sketched in careful pencil. The sad lady drew this. Clara sat beside her daughter. She did. She loved the kids here, didn't she? Very much. Sophie was quiet for a moment, tracing the drawing's lines with one finger. Mama, what would make the sad lady happy? The question hit Clara like a physical blow. She looked at her daughter, this 8-year-old child who somehow understood what Clara had been too overwhelmed to see. What would make Evelyn happy? Not the money, not the fame, not even the recognition, though she deserved that. Evelyn had wanted the paintings sold to help future mothers who society has forgotten. She'd wanted her legacy to continue caring for people the world didn't value. Clara thought about her own decade of invisibility, about cleaning other people's toilets while her daughter went hungry, about being dismissed, overlooked, erased. And she thought about the women still living that life, still working 3 jobs, still raising children alone in studio apartments, still invisible. She stood up, her decision crystallizing. Back in the mediation room, she faced the assembled group with newfound clarity. I've made my decision, Clara said. The bulk of the collection will be donated to museums. Not sold, donated. With one condition. Every exhibition must credit Evelyn Meridian's vision and tell the story of the immigrant artists she supported. Their names, their struggles, their humanity. They don't get to be anonymous anymore. Vanessa made a noise of disgust. You're throwing away $300 million. I'm not finished. Clara turned to Dmitri. Your grandfather's 4 paintings will be returned to your family. He gave them as gratitude, not payment. You should have them. Dmitri's eyes widened. Ms. Bennett, but I'm keeping 6 paintings. Not the most valuable ones, those go to museums. 6 pieces by lesser-known artists whose work won't command headlines but still has worth. She looked at Adrian. We'll sell those 6 through ethical auction. The proceeds will fund an endowment exactly as Evelyn intended, to transform this building into the Evelyn Meridian Center for Single Mothers. A transitional home providing housing, childcare, job training, and support. The room erupted. Vanessa stood furious. This is insanity. You're a fool? I'm honoring Evelyn's wishes, Clara said firmly. Marcus leaned forward. The city still maintains ownership claims. No, you don't. Rachel slid a document across the table. The sale was legal and complete. And if you try to claim otherwise, I'll file suit for harassment, abuse of power, and the procedural violations Taylor Morrison documented. Your political career will end before you can say luxury condos. Marcus's face went through several shades of red before he stood and left without another word. The museum representatives were smiling. Ms. Bennett, this is extraordinarily generous. We'd be honored to. With Evelyn's name on everything, Clara interrupted. Every placard, every catalog entry, every press release. She doesn't get forgotten again. They nodded eagerly. Dmitri stood, walked to Clara, and took her hand. My grandfather would have loved you. This is exactly what Evelyn would have wanted. As thanks, I will donate $1 million to your endowment. The descendants of other artists began nodding, offering smaller donations. Even the museum representatives pledged support for the center. Only Vanessa remained furious, gathering her things with sharp, angry movements. At the door, she turned back. You could have been somebody. Instead, you'll still be nobody, just with a slightly nicer title. Clara met her gaze steadily. I'd rather be nobody doing something that matters than somebody who only cares about profit. After Vanessa left, Susan Chun smiled. I'll draw up the agreements. This is going to take time to finalize, but I think we have a framework everyone can accept. As the room emptied, Father Miguel approached Clara. You did the right thing. I gave away a fortune, Clara said, the reality sinking in. You created a legacy. There's a difference. Outside, Sophie was waiting with Nadia. When Clara explained what had happened, Sophie hugged her fiercely. The sad lady would be happy, she whispered. Clara held her daughter, feeling the weight of the decision settle into something like peace. She'd chosen meaning over money, purpose over profit, and somehow, improbably, it felt like the first truly free choice she'd made in 10 years. 6 months later, the Evelyn Meridian Center opened its doors. The orphanage had been transformed. Fresh paint covered walls that had crumbled for decades. New windows let in streams of light. The murals in the dining hall had been carefully restored, children playing among painted flowers once again visible. Clara stood in the entrance hall, watching the first residents arrive. 3 single mothers, their children clinging to their hands, eyes wide with hope and fear that Clara recognized instantly. Welcome, she said, and meant it. Nadia gave tours, sharing memories of Evelyn with anyone who'd listen. Adrian's book sat on prominent display in the library, Evelyn Meridian, Art, Orphanhood, and Invisible Labor in 1920s Portland. The paintings now hung in museums across the country, each exhibition crediting Evelyn's vision. The endowment had generated $47 million. Not the fortune Clara could have had, but enough to sustain the center for decades. James appeared late in the ceremony, hesitant but genuine. Their reconciliation was fragile, built on awkward coffee meetings and careful conversations, but it was real. David had proven himself through consistency. Weekly supervised visits, child support paid without complaint, slow integration into Sophie's life. Jennifer had become an unexpected ally, another mother who understood. During her speech, Clara unveiled Evelyn's portrait, the simple painting of children playing. Evelyn Meridian believed forgotten children deserved beauty and dignity, she said. She was forgotten herself, but invisible doesn't mean worthless. Today we remember her, and we promise the mothers and children who come here will never be invisible again. Applause filled the hall, but Clara's favorite moment came later, in the quiet. She sat in Evelyn's old office and opened the journal to that final entry. For future mothers who society has forgotten. Beneath it, Clara wrote, I was forgotten. You remembered me across 70 years. Now I'll remember others. Your legacy lives. Outside, children's laughter echoed through halls silent for decades. The Meridian home was alive again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.